A lonely millionaire invited his assistant to a ball. They laughed, but when she arrived, before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she shouldn't check her phone again, but she did anyway. The notification glowed mockingly on Isabella Hart's screen as she sat in the pristine marble lobby of Leclerc Vineyards, waiting for her boss to finish his conference call. The Instagram post had been up for exactly 4 hours and 12 minutes, not that she was counting. Her ex-boyfriend Marcus smiled brilliantly from a sunset beach in Santorini, his arm wrapped around a blonde influencer whose teeth were impossibly white against her golden tan. "Finally found my piece," the caption read, followed by a heart emoji and the influencer's tagged handle. Isabella's chest tightened. 6 months. 6 months since Marcus had told her she was too intense and too focused on work to make a relationship work. 6 months since he'd packed his things from their shared apartment in Sacramento, leaving behind only the faint scent of his cologne and a stack of unpaid utility bills. She locked her phone and smoothed down her navy blazer, forcing herself to focus on the stack of contracts waiting for review. The Leclerc Vineyards headquarters buzzed with quiet efficiency around her, employees in crisp shirts discussing harvest schedules, the soft click of keyboards, the distant hum of wine barrels being moved in the warehouse below. Everything here had its place, its purpose, its perfection, just like Dante Leclerc himself. At 34, Dante commanded attention without demanding it. Isabella had worked as his personal assistant for 2 years, and she still felt a flutter of nervous energy whenever he walked into a room. Today was no different. He emerged from his office with that familiar, confident stride, his charcoal suit tailored to perfection, dark hair styled with precise gel work that never seemed to move despite California's unpredictable winds. "Isabella, the Napa partnership contracts." He stopped mid-sentence, his steel-gray eyes studying her face with unexpected intensity. "You look tired." It wasn't a question. Dante Leclerc didn't ask questions when he could make observations. "I'm fine, Mr. Leclerc, just reviewing the Henderson acquisition details." She held up the folder, hoping her smile looked more convincing than it felt. He didn't buy it. Instead of taking the folder, he sat in the leather chair across from her, something he'd never done before. The lobby suddenly felt smaller, more intimate. "The Henderson deal can wait." "What's wrong?" Isabella blinked, startled by the genuine concern in his voice. In 2 years of working together, their conversations had been professional, efficient, respectful. He knew she was capable, trusted her judgment, and paid her well. But personal questions? Those lived in uncharted territory. "Really, it's nothing." Her phone buzzed again, another notification. Before she could stop herself, her eyes flicked to the screen. Marcus had posted a story, a boomerang of him and the influencer clinking champagne glasses, her laugh silent but radiant in the looping video. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Someone who doesn't know your worth." The question hung in the air like morning fog over the vineyard hills. Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks, embarrassed that her personal life had become so transparent. She'd prided herself on being unshakable, the assistant who could handle crisis calls from distributors, manage Dante's impossible schedule, and coordinate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But here she was unraveling over an Instagram post. We dated for 3 years. He said I was too ambitious, too focused on building something meaningful instead of just living in the moment. The words came out faster than she intended. Apparently, living in the moment meant waiting for him to decide I was worth committing to. Dante was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes that seemed to see through all the careful walls she'd built. Isabella. Her name sounded different when he said it, softer somehow. "Men who can't handle your ambition aren't intimidated by your success. They're terrified by their own mediocrity." She felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with being truly seen. "The annual Harvest Gala is next Saturday," Dante continued, his voice steady but something new flickering in his expression. "I'd like you to attend, not as my assistant." Isabella's heart stopped. "Mr. Leclerc, as my guest," he finished, standing and straightening his jacket. "Think about it." He walked toward the elevator, leaving Isabella sitting in the marble lobby, with her phone still glowing with notifications she no longer wanted to see. And for the first time in 6 months, Marcus's posts were the furthest thing from her mind. What would you do if your boss asked you to be more than just an employee? The coffee shop on 5th Street had become Isabella's sanctuary. Every morning at 6:47 a.m., she claimed the same corner table, ordered the same medium roast with oat milk, and spent exactly 23 minutes preparing for whatever chaos Dante Leclerc's schedule would throw at her. But this Tuesday morning, 3 days after his unexpected invitation, the routine felt different. The familiar sounds, steaming milk, quiet conversations, the gentle scrape of chairs, couldn't drown out the question that had been echoing in her mind. As my guest, Isabella traced the rim of her coffee cup, watching the barista with purple-streaked hair expertly craft latte art for a customer in paint-splattered overalls. The normalcy of it all felt surreal when her own world had tilted off its axis with 2 simple words. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Monique in Oakland. "Girl, you've been radio silent for days. What's going on?" Isabella stared at the message. How could she explain that her emotionally unavailable boss, the man who scheduled meetings like military operations and whose idea of small talk was asking about quarterly projections, had just upended everything she thought she knew about their professional relationship? She typed back, "Work stuff. Call you later." The truth was more complicated. Isabella had spent the weekend researching the annual Harvest Gala, scrolling through photos from previous years. Society pages filled with California's wine elite, women in designer gowns that cost more than Isabella's monthly rent, men in custom tuxedos discussing ventures worth millions, the kind of event where her presence would be noticed, questioned, dissected. The coffee shop door chimed and Isabella's breath caught. Dante walked in, somehow making the casual act of ordering coffee look like a board meeting. He wore a navy suit today, his hair perfectly styled despite the October morning fog, and when he spotted her in the corner, something shifted in his expression. He approached her table with 2 cups. "May I?" Isabella nodded, surprised when he sat across from her. Again. In 2 years she'd never seen Dante Leclerc in a coffee shop, let alone sharing a table with anyone. "You've been avoiding me," he said, setting down what appeared to be her exact coffee order. Medium roast, oat milk, no sugar. "I haven't been avoiding—" She stopped, realizing the lie sounded hollow even to her own ears. "How did you know my coffee order?" "I pay attention." He took a sip of his espresso, studying her with those grey eyes that seemed to catalogue every micro-expression. "You've been professional, punctual, and perfectly polite, which means you're avoiding me." Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Mr. Leclerc, about Saturday—" "Dante," he interrupted softly. "If you're going to turn me down, at least use my name." The intimacy of it caught her off guard. In the sterile corporate environment of Leclerc Vineyards, he was always Mr. Leclerc, the untouchable CEO who inherited an empire at 22 and built it into something legendary. But here, in this coffee shop with its mismatched furniture and indie music, he was just Dante. "I don't understand why you asked me," she said finally. "You could have anyone. Models, socialites, women who belong in that world." "Belong?" Dante's voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. "Isabella, you command a room without trying. You solve problems others can't even identify. You make impossible schedules work and turn chaos into order. What exactly do you think you don't belong to?" A businessman at the next table glanced over, clearly recognizing Dante. Isabella watched recognition dawn in the man's eyes, followed by curiosity as he took in their intimate conversation. She shifted uncomfortably. "People will talk," she murmured. "People always talk. The question is whether you care more about their opinions or your own happiness." Isabella's phone buzzed again. Marcus had tagged her in an old photo from their anniversary dinner last year, with the caption, "Good times with good people. Miss the simple days." The notification felt like a slap. 3 days of radio silence, and now he wanted to play nostalgia games. Isabella's jaw clenched as she declined the tag, but not before Dante noticed the tension in her shoulders. Him again. Dante's voice was deceptively calm, but Isabella caught the steel underneath. "He tagged me in an old photo." "Miss the simple days," she said bitterly. "Apparently I'm simple now that I'm not in his life anymore." Dante was quiet for a long moment, then reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. The contact was warm, steady, grounding. "Isabella, look at me." She did, and found herself caught in the intensity of his gaze. "You are not simple. You are not too much. You are not someone's consolation prize." His thumb traced across her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "You are the first person I think about when I wake up, and the last person I want to see before I go home." The coffee shop seemed to disappear around them. Isabella felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack, revealing the longing she'd been trying so hard to ignore. "Dante," she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently, then released it, leaning back in his chair. "Saturday, 8 o'clock. I'll pick you up." He stood, straightening his jacket with that familiar precision. "Wear whatever makes you feel beautiful. You already are." He left money on the table for both coffees and walked toward the door, pausing only to look back at her one more time. "And Isabella, delete his number. You deserve someone who knows your worth from the beginning." The door chimed shut behind him, leaving Isabella alone with her racing heart and a decision that would change everything. She looked down at her phone, Marcus's notification still glowing on the screen. Then she blocked him. The burgundy dress had been hanging in Isabella's closet for 8 months. She'd bought it on sale at Nordstrom Rack after her promotion to senior assistant, telling herself she'd find an occasion worthy of the elegant fabric and perfect fit. The price tag still dangled from the sleeve, a reminder of dreams deferred and celebrations that never came. Marcus had always preferred her in simpler outfits, claiming the dress was too much for a Tuesday dinner or too formal for his friends. Now standing in her modest apartment in Midtown Sacramento, Isabella held the dress against her body and studied her reflection in the full-length mirror she'd inherited from her grandmother. The deep wine color complemented her rich brown skin beautifully, and the cut hugged her curves in all the right places. For the first time in months, she felt beautiful. Her phone rang, interrupting the moment. Monique's face filled the screen, eyebrows raised in that knowing expression that had gotten Isabella in trouble since childhood. "Okay, spill," Monique said without preamble. "And don't you dare tell me it's just work stuff. I know that look." Isabella sank onto her bed, still holding the dress. "What look?" "The I'm terrified but excited and trying to pretend I'm not look. The same look you had before your first job interview at the Vineyard." Monique's voice softened. "Belle, what's really going on?" The nickname made Isabella's chest tighten. Only family called her Belle, and only when they were worried. "My boss asked me to a gala," she said finally. "Not for work, as his guest." Silence stretched across the phone line. Then, "Hold up. Your emotionally unavailable workaholic, gorgeous but untouchable boss asked you on a date." "It's not a date," Isabella protested, though the words felt hollow. "It's just complicated. Honey, when a man who looks like a magazine cover asks you to be his guest at a fancy event, it's a date. The question is, do you want it to be?" Isabella closed her eyes, remembering the weight of Dante's hand over hers, the intensity in his voice when he'd told her she deserved someone who knew her worth from the beginning. "I blocked Marcus," she said, instead of answering. "Finally! I've been waiting 2 years for you to do that." Monique's celebration was audible through the phone. "So this boss of yours gave you the push you needed? His name is Dante, and he sees me, Mo, really sees me. Not just what I can do for him, but who I am. And that terrifies you." Isabella nodded, even though her sister couldn't see her. "What if this ruins everything? What if I'm reading the signals wrong? What if you're exactly right, and you're about to have the most amazing night of your life?" Monique interrupted. "Belle, you've spent 3 years dimming your light for a man who couldn't handle your brightness. Maybe it's time to see what happens when you shine for someone who appreciates the glow." After hanging up, Isabella spent an hour getting ready with a care she hadn't taken in months. She twisted her braids into an elegant updo, leaving a few tendrils to frame her face. Her makeup was subtle but striking, highlighting her best features without hiding behind false confidence. When she slipped into the burgundy dress and stepped into her black heels, the woman looking back at her in the mirror was someone she almost didn't recognize, someone who looked worthy of standing beside Dante Leclerc. At exactly 8 o'clock, a gentle knock echoed through her apartment. Isabella grabbed her small clutch purse, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Dante stood in the hallway, wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped off a movie screen. His hair was styled to perfection, his bow tie precise, and when his eyes met hers, she watched something shift in his expression, surprise, admiration, and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. Isabella. Her name came out as barely more than a whisper. "You look too much." The old insecurity crept into her voice before she could stop it. "Breathtaking," he finished, stepping closer. "Absolutely breathtaking." He offered his arm, and as she slipped her hand through the crook of his elbow, Isabella felt the last of her reservations begin to dissolve. They walked to his car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than her annual salary, and Dante opened the passenger door for her with old-fashioned courtesy that made her heart flutter. As they drove through Sacramento's evening traffic toward Sonoma, the conversation flowed easier than Isabella had expected. Dante asked about her family, her dreams, her thoughts on everything from books to travel to the changing colors of the autumn vineyards. He listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions that showed he was truly engaged. "I have a confession," Dante said as they turned onto the winding road leading to the gala venue. "I've wanted to ask you to dinner for months. I just couldn't figure out how to cross that line professionally." Isabella's breath caught. "Months? Since last Christmas, when you stayed late to help me finish the year-end reports. You had glue in your hair from gift wrapping, and you were humming while you worked." He glanced at her, a small smile playing at his lips. "I realized then that I looked forward to Monday mornings because it meant seeing you again." The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest. Isabella felt something unlock in her chest, a door she'd kept carefully guarded finally beginning to open. "Dante," she started, but her words were interrupted by the sight ahead of them. The gala venue blazed with light, luxury cars lining the circular drive, women in designer gowns and men in expensive tuxedos, making their way up the red-carpeted steps. Camera flashes went off as local photographers captured the wine industry's elite, arriving for the most prestigious event of the season. Isabella's confidence wavered as the reality of the situation hit her. This wasn't just a date. This was Dante Leclerc making a public statement, and she was about to become the center of attention in a world that might not be ready to accept her. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Isabella felt every eye turn toward them as Dante placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the opulent entrance of the Silverado Country Club. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic rainbows across marble floors, and the air hummed with quiet conversations that seemed to pause as they passed. She recognized some faces from business magazines and wine industry publications, people whose net worth could fund small countries, whose approval could make or break careers. "Breathe," Dante murmured near her ear, his voice steady and reassuring. "You belong here." But belonging and being accepted were two different things, and Isabella could feel the weight of scrutiny like a physical presence pressing against her skin. A woman in emerald silk whispered something to her companion behind a strategically placed champagne flute, their eyes following Isabella's every move. "Dante Leclerc," a booming voice called from across the room. A silver-haired man in an expensive tuxedo approached with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "I was wondering when you'd arrive, and who is this lovely young woman?" Isabella felt Dante's hand tighten protectively against her back. "Richard Westbrook, I'd like you to meet Isabella Hart." "Isabella, Richard owns Westbrook Estates, our biggest competitor and my father's oldest friend." Richard's handshake was firm, his smile polished, but Isabella caught the calculating look in his eyes as he assessed her. "Hart, I don't believe I know your family. Are you new to the valley?" "I'm Dante's personal assistant," Isabella replied with practiced professionalism, lifting her chin slightly. "Have been for 2 years." The shift in Richard's expression was subtle but unmistakable. His eyebrows rose just a fraction, and when he looked back at Dante, there was something that looked almost like amusement. "How progressive of you, Dante. Mixing business with pleasure." Richard's tone was light, but the implications hung heavy in the air. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Isabella is here as my guest because I enjoy her company and respect her intellect. I trust that's not a foreign concept, even in traditional circles." The words were delivered with such controlled politeness that they felt more dangerous than any outright confrontation. Richard's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. Of course. Well, enjoy the evening, you two." He melted back into the crowd, but Isabella could feel his eyes following them. "I'm sorry about that," Dante said, as they moved toward the bar. "Richard has always been a dinosaur who thinks he's being subtle," Isabella finished, surprising herself with her boldness. "I've handled worse. Trust me." Dante's laugh was genuine, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Remind me never to underestimate you." They ordered drinks, wine for him, a cosmopolitan for her, and found a quieter corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the vineyard-covered hills. The October evening had painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, and for a moment, Isabella allowed herself to simply enjoy the beauty of it all. "You're handling this better than I expected," Dante said, studying her profile as she gazed out at the landscape. "Did you expect me to fall apart?" Isabella turned to face him, genuinely curious. I expected you to be magnificent. You haven't disappointed. He reached up to tuck a loose tendril of hair behind her ear, the gesture so tender it made her breath catch. But I also know what it's like to be judged before you've even spoken. I didn't want that for you. Isabella felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the alcohol and everything to do with the man standing beside her. You can't protect me from everything, Dante, and I wouldn't want you to. Before he could respond, the band began playing a slow jazz standard, and couples began moving toward the dance floor. Dante extended his hand with a slight bow that was both playful and formal. Miss Hart, would you do me the honor? Isabella placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses on his palms from years of working in the vineyard despite his wealth. I thought you'd never ask. They moved together naturally, Dante's hand on her waist, hers on his shoulder, their joined hands creating a connection that felt electric. Isabella had worried about dancing with someone so much taller, but Dante led with such confidence that she felt graceful, elegant, perfectly matched. You dance well, she murmured as he spun her gently. My mother insisted on lessons, said a gentleman should know how to make a woman feel beautiful on a dance floor. His eyes never left hers. I'm grateful for the education. Around them other couples swayed to the music, but Isabella felt like they were alone in their own private world. The whispers and stares faded into background noise as Dante pulled her closer, his hand warm against the silk of her dress. Isabella, he said her name like a prayer, and she could see something vulnerable in his expression. Whatever happens after tonight, I want you to know. Excuse me. A sharp voice cut through their moment. Isabella turned to see a blonde woman in a white gown that probably cost more than Isabella's car, her smile as sharp as cut glass. I hope I'm not interrupting. Dante's entire body went rigid. Vivian. Hello, darling. It's been too long. Vivian's eyes swept over Isabella with practiced dismissal before returning to Dante. I was hoping we could have a word, privately. Isabella felt the magic of the moment shatter like crystal hitting concrete. She started to step back, but Dante's hand tightened on her waist, keeping her close. Whatever you need to say, you can say it here, Dante replied, his voice cooler than Isabella had ever heard it. Vivian's laugh was musical and cruel, still so protective. Some things never change. She looked directly at Isabella then, her smile widening. Has he told you about us? About our engagement? The words hit Isabella like a physical blow, but she kept her expression carefully neutral, years of professional training serving her well, even as her heart began to fracture. And in that moment, she realized that some spotlights were designed not to illuminate but to burn. Isabella felt the music stop, but her heart kept racing. Vivian, Dante's voice carried a warning that made several nearby couples glance in their direction. We ended that conversation 3 years ago. Vivian's perfectly manicured hand touched her pearl necklace, a gesture that seemed calculated to draw attention to the massive diamond ring adorning her finger. Did we? Because I seem to remember you saying you needed time to think. I've been very patient, darling. Isabella's professional mask threatened to slip. 3 years. The same amount of time she'd been working for Dante, building what she thought was trust, respect, maybe even something deeper. But how much of that had been real if he'd been harboring feelings for someone else this entire time? Excuse me, Isabella said quietly, proud that her voice remained steady. I think I'll get some air. She turned to leave, but Dante caught her wrist gently. Isabella, don't... Let her go, Dante. Vivian's voice dripped with false sweetness. We have so much catching up to do. Besides, I'm sure your assistant has work to attend to, even at a social function. The deliberate emphasis on assistant felt like a slap, but it was Dante's hesitation, the fraction of a second where he looked torn between following Isabella and confronting his past, that truly broke her heart. Isabella pulled her wrist free with dignity intact and walked toward the French doors leading to the terrace, her chin held high despite the curious stares following her every step. She could hear Vivian's musical laugh behind her, and it took every ounce of self-control not to quicken her pace. The October air was crisp against her skin as she stepped onto the stone terrace overlooking the valley. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and the distant sound of the party felt muffled and surreal. Isabella gripped the marble balustrade and forced herself to breathe slowly, methodically, the way her mother had taught her during childhood panic attacks. Rough night? Isabella turned to find a woman about her age leaning against the far end of the terrace, smoking a cigarette with practiced elegance. She had short auburn hair, kind eyes, and wore a simple black dress that somehow looked more expensive than half the gowns inside. "You could say that," Isabella replied, grateful for a friendly face. "I'm Lauren Bridges, and you're the woman who has the entire room buzzing." Lauren stubbed out her cigarette and moved closer. "Don't worry, not all the buzzing is bad. Most of the women in there are insanely jealous that Dante Leclerc finally brought someone to one of these things. Finally. Honey, that man has been the most eligible bachelor in Sonoma for over a decade. Every society mother with a single daughter has been throwing women at him since he turned 30. He's polite, charming, but completely untouchable." Lauren studied Isabella with genuine interest. Until tonight. Isabella felt a flicker of something. Hope, maybe. But it was quickly extinguished by the memory of Vivian's words. "What do you know about Vivian?" Lauren's expression darkened. "Vivian Ashford. Old money, older attitudes, and the persistence of a barnacle. She's been trying to hook Dante since they were teenagers. There was talk of an engagement a few years back, but it never materialized. Most people assumed he'd finally come to his senses. She said they were engaged. Vivian says a lot of things. The woman once told everyone at the country club that she was personally consulted on the royal wedding flowers because she knew someone who knew someone." Lauren rolled her eyes. "She's beautiful, connected, and completely self-absorbed. Everything Dante's too smart to actually want in a life partner." Before Isabella could respond, footsteps echoed on the terrace stones. Dante appeared in the doorway, his bow tie loosened, his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "Isabella." He looked relieved to find her, but there was something wounded in his expression. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Lauren took the hint. "I'll leave you two to talk. Isabella, it was lovely meeting you. I hope to see you around more often." She squeezed Isabella's hand briefly before disappearing back into the ballroom. Dante approached slowly, as if Isabella might bolt again. "I need to explain about Vivian." "Do you?" Isabella turned to face him fully, her emotions finally threatening to spill over. "Because it seems pretty clear. You have history with her. Important history. And you're just what? Your assistant who got above her station." The words came out harsher than she intended, laced with all the insecurity she'd been trying to suppress. Dante's face went pale. "Is that really what you think? That this is about stations and positions and social climbing?" "I don't know what to think anymore." Isabella's voice cracked slightly. 3 years, Dante, you never mentioned her. Never mentioned that you'd been engaged to someone who clearly still considers herself part of your life. Because she's not." Dante stepped closer, his voice urgent. "Isabella, listen to me. Vivian and I were never engaged. Her father and mine arranged a business partnership when we were kids. Vineyards merging, old families joining forces. For a while, I thought maybe that was enough. Maybe marriage could be a practical arrangement." He ran a hand through his hair, destroying the last of his perfect styling. "But I couldn't do it. I couldn't spend my life with someone I didn't love, someone who saw me as a business acquisition rather than a person. So I ended it before it really began." Isabella wanted to believe him, but the doubt that Marcus had planted deep in her heart whispered cruel warnings. "Then why did she seem so confident? Why did you hesitate when she wanted to talk?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes reflecting the fairy lights overhead. "Because I was afraid. Afraid that if you heard her version first, you'd believe it. Afraid that you'd think I was just another wealthy man playing games with his employee." The honesty in his voice made Isabella's chest ache. "And what are you, Dante? What is this really about?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his body. "This is about the fact that I haven't been able to concentrate on anything but you for months. This is about the way you make me laugh without trying, the way you solve problems I didn't even know I had. This is about falling in love with a woman who challenges me, inspires me, and makes me want to be better than I thought I could be." Isabella's breath caught. "Dante, I love you, Isabella. Not because you work for me, not despite the fact that you work for me, but because you're extraordinary. And if I've ruined that by not being brave enough to tell you sooner, then I'll have to live with that regret for the rest of my life." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge. Neither of them was sure they could cross. Isabella felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief of finally hearing the truth she'd been afraid to hope for. But before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification that made her blood run cold. A text from an unknown number. "Saw the society photos already posted online. Interesting company you're keeping these days. And Marcus had found a way back into her life at the exact moment she was ready to open her heart to someone new. The phone trembled in Isabella's hands. She stared at the message, watching the words blur as tears she'd been holding back finally threatened to spill. M. Even now, Marcus couldn't use his full name, as if their 3-year relationship could be reduced to a single letter, a casual initial that minimized everything they'd shared. Isabella. Dante's voice seemed to come from underwater. What's wrong? She looked up at him, this man who had just laid his heart bare under the October stars, and felt the cruel irony of timing hit her like a physical blow. The exact moment she was ready to believe in love again, her past had found a way to poison the present. He knows, she whispered, holding up the phone. Marcus, he saw photos of us online already. Dante's jaw tightened as he read the message over her shoulder. How did he get your new number? I don't know, I blocked him everywhere. Isabella's hands shook as she scrolled through her contacts, trying to figure out how Marcus had breached the walls she'd so carefully constructed. I must have asked someone, or another message appeared. You look beautiful, Belle, different, happy, I made a mistake. Belle, Dante's voice was dangerously quiet. It's what he used to call me. Isabella felt sick. Only my family calls me that now. A third message followed immediately. Can we talk? I'm at the Marriott downtown, room 847. I drove up from LA when I saw the photos. We need to discuss what this means for us. Us? Isabella laughed bitterly. There is no us. There hasn't been for 6 months. But even as she said it, she could feel the old patterns trying to reassert themselves. Marcus had always been good at this, appearing just when she'd found her footing, making her question her own reality with his sudden attention and declarations of regret. Dante was watching her carefully, and she could see him cataloguing every micro-expression, every hesitation. What do you want to do? The question was simple, but the weight behind it was enormous. Isabella could see the fear in Dante's eyes, not fear of Marcus, but fear that she might choose the familiar pain of her past over the uncertain promise of their future. I want to ignore him, she said finally. I want to delete these messages and pretend he doesn't exist. But, Isabella closed her eyes, hating herself for the doubt creeping in. But what if he's changed? What if seeing me happy made him realize what he lost? What if... Isabella, Dante's voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. She did, finding steadiness in his grey eyes that felt like an anchor in a storm. What did he say when you broke up? The memory hit her like a slap, that I was too intense, too focused on my career, that he needed someone who could just enjoy life instead of always planning for the future. And now he sees you at a gala, successful, beautiful, with someone who appreciates those exact qualities, and suddenly he's changed. Dante stepped closer, his voice soft but urgent. Isabella, that's not love, that's possession. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. Somehow he'd gotten through her blocks, or maybe he was calling from a different number. Don't answer it, Dante said quietly. But Isabella was already swiping to accept the call, some masochistic part of her needing to hear Marcus's voice, to understand what game he was playing now. Belle, thank God. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. Marcus's voice was exactly as she remembered. Smooth, confident, with that slight California accent that had once made her heart flutter. Now it just made her feel tired. What do you want, Marcus? I want to apologize. I want to explain. Seeing those photos of you tonight, God, Belle, you look incredible. And I realized what an idiot I've been. Dante's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he remained silent, letting Isabella handle the conversation on her own terms. You're 6 months too late, Isabella said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to make me jealous. And it worked. I'm here now, ready to fight for us. The audacity of it took Isabella's breath away. Make you jealous, Marcus? I blocked you, I moved on, I found someone who what? Loves you? Marcus's laugh was cruel. Belle, come on. You're his employee. You think this is real? You think men like Dante Leclerc actually fall for their assistants, or do you think maybe you're just convenient? The words hit every insecurity Isabella had ever harbored about her relationship with Dante. She felt herself wavering, the old doubts rushing back like a tide she couldn't control. That's enough. Dante's voice cut through the phone call with quiet authority. Isabella, give me the phone. She looked at him, surprised by the controlled anger in his expression. Please, he said more gently, let me handle this. Isabella hesitated for a moment, then handed him the phone. Dante accepted it like he was handling something toxic. Marcus, he said, his voice deadly calm. "This is Dante Leclerc." She could hear Marcus's surprised laughter through the speaker. The boss man himself. "Let me guess. You're going to tell me to stay away from your property?" "No," Dante replied, his eyes never leaving Isabella's face. "I'm going to tell you that Isabella deserves better than someone who only wants her when he can't have her. But more importantly, I'm going to let her decide for herself what she wants." He handed the phone back to Isabella, and she could see something vulnerable in his expression. A man who had just revealed his heart and was now watching to see if it would be trampled. "Belle?" Marcus's voice came through the speaker, softer now, more persuasive. "I'm staying at the hotel until tomorrow night. If you want to talk, really talk about giving us another chance, I'll be here. But if you don't show up, I'll know you've made your choice." The line went dead. Isabella stared at the phone, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her like a physical force. On one side was Marcus, familiar, flawed, representing a past she thought she'd closed the door on. On the other was Dante, unknown territory, terrifying in its potential for both heartbreak and happiness. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked quietly. Isabella looked up at him, this man who had just watched another man try to claim her and had still given her the choice. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that I need to end this once and for all." Dante's face went pale. "You're going to see him." "Yes," Isabella said, and watched something break in Dante's eyes. "But not for the reason you think." She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, feeling the slight roughness of his 5 o'clock shadow against her palms. "I'm going to see him because I need him to understand that some doors, once closed, don't get to be opened again. And I need to understand it too." Dante covered her hands with his, hope and fear warring in his expression. "And then?" he asked. Isabella smiled, feeling something settle into place in her chest, a certainty she hadn't felt in months. "And then, I'm going to come back to the man who loves me for exactly who I am." The Marriott's elevator hummed quietly as it climbed to the 8th floor. Isabella watched the numbers change, 5, 6, 7, and tried to steady her breathing. She'd changed out of her burgundy gown and into dark jeans and a cream sweater, trading elegance for armor. The transformation felt symbolic somehow, like shedding the version of herself that Marcus had never truly appreciated. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dante. "I'll be waiting, however long it takes." The simple message gave her strength. Unlike Marcus, who demanded immediate responses and constant validation, Dante understood that some battles had to be fought alone. The elevator dinged softly at the 8th floor. Isabella stepped into the carpeted hallway, her heels muffled against the burgundy runner. Room 847 was at the end of the hall, and with each step, memories flooded back unbidden. Marcus making coffee in their shared kitchen. Marcus cancelling dinner plans because his friends wanted to go out. Marcus telling her she was too much on the night she got promoted. She knocked twice, sharp and decisive. The door opened immediately, as if Marcus had been waiting by the handle. He looked exactly the same. Sandy brown hair, perfectly tousled, green eyes that had once made her feel special, wearing a casual button-down that she recognized from their time together. The familiar cologne hit her like a wave of nostalgia mixed with nausea. "Belle." His smile was the one he used to reserve for apologies. "You came. I said I would." Isabella stepped into the room, but didn't move far from the door. The space was sterile, impersonal. A business suite with a king bed, a sitting area, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Sacramento's downtown lights. Marcus closed the door and turned to face her, his expression suddenly vulnerable in a way that might have worked 6 months ago. "You look beautiful. Different, but beautiful." "Different how?" "Confident, like you know something I don't." He moved closer, and Isabella caught herself taking a step back. "Belle, I've had 6 months to think about what I lost, about what we had." "What we had," Isabella repeated slowly, "was you deciding I was too ambitious while you figured out what you wanted to do with your life. What we had was me supporting your dreams while you criticized mine." Marcus flinched. "I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Isabella's voice rose slightly before she caught herself. "Marcus, you told me I was exhausting. You said dating me felt like a job interview because I actually wanted to build a future together." "I was scared," he said, running a hand through his hair. "You were so focused, so driven. I felt like I couldn't keep up. So instead of trying to grow with me, you made me feel like I needed to shrink myself to fit into your world." The words hung between them, 6 months of suppressed anger finally finding their voice. Marcus looked genuinely surprised, as if he'd never considered that perspective before. That's not... I never meant to make you feel that way. Intent doesn't erase impact, Marcus. Isabella moved to the window, needing the physical distance. The city lights below sparkled like scattered diamonds, and somewhere out there Dante was waiting for her to come home to him. I saw the photos, Marcus said quietly, from the gala tonight. You and him. Dante. Dante, Marcus repeated like the name tasted bitter. Do you love him? The question caught Isabella off guard with its directness. She turned from the window to find Marcus watching her intently, and for a moment she saw genuine pain in his expression. Yes, she said simply. I do. More than you loved me? Isabella considered the question seriously, because Marcus deserved that much honesty, even if he'd never given her the same courtesy. I loved you desperately, she said finally. I loved you like someone drowning love's air, frantically, hungrily, willing to sacrifice pieces of myself for each breath. But with Dante, I love him like someone who's learned how to swim, deeply, confidently, without losing myself in the process. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I came here thinking I could convince you to give us another chance. And now? Now I'm realizing that the woman I fell in love with 3 years ago has grown into someone I don't think I ever really knew. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed. When I saw those photos, my first thought wasn't that I missed you. It was that I was angry someone else got to have the version of you I couldn't handle. The admission was startling in its honesty, and Isabella felt something in her chest finally fully let go. Marcus, she said gently, I'm not angry with you anymore. I'm grateful. Grateful for letting me go, for showing me what it felt like to dim my light for someone else's comfort, because now I know the difference between someone who loves me despite who I am and someone who loves me because of who I am. Marcus looked up at her, and she could see the exact moment he truly understood that she was never coming back. Not because she was choosing someone else, but because she had chosen herself. He's lucky, Marcus said quietly. Dante. He's lucky to get the version of you that I was too scared to love. Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the relief of finally being seen clearly by someone who had spent 3 years looking through her instead of at her. I hope you find someone who makes you want to be braver, she said. Someone who inspires you to grow instead of making you feel like you need to stay small? Marcus nodded, unable to meet her eyes. I should go back to LA tomorrow. That's probably best. Isabella moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. Marcus, delete my number. Really delete it this time. What we had was real, but it's over. Let it stay over. Belle, Isabella, he corrected himself. Will you be happy? With him? She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. I already am. Isabella stepped into the hallway and heard the door close softly behind her. As she waited for the elevator, she pulled out her phone and did something she should have done months ago. She deleted Marcus's contact information completely. Then she texted Dante, coming home. His response was immediate. I'll be here. As the elevator descended, Isabella caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. The woman looking back at her was someone she'd almost forgotten existed, confident, whole, unafraid of taking up space in the world. For the first time in 6 months, Isabella Hart felt truly free, and she couldn't wait to see what that freedom would build with someone who loved her exactly as she was. Dante's house sat in darkness except for the warm glow spilling from the kitchen windows. Isabella pulled into the circular driveway at nearly midnight, her hands still trembling slightly from the confrontation with Marcus. The modern glass and stone structure looked different in the darkness, less imposing, more welcoming, like a sanctuary rather than a fortress. She'd been here dozens of times for work functions and business meetings, but tonight felt different. Tonight, she wasn't crossing the threshold as his assistant. She was coming home to the man she loved. The front door opened before she could knock. Dante stood silhouetted in the entryway, still wearing his tuxedo pants and white dress shirt, though he'd long since discarded his jacket and bow tie. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, and his hair was disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. Isabella. Her name came out like a prayer of relief. She stepped into his arms without hesitation, feeling them close around her like coming home after a long journey. He smelled like wine and cedar, and something uniquely him that made her feel safe. For a moment they just held each other in the doorway, the weight of the evening finally settling into something manageable. How did it go? Dante asked softly, his lips brushing against her temple. It's over, Isabella said simply. Really, truly over. She felt some of the tension leave his body. Are you okay? Isabella pulled back to look at him, studying the concern etched in the lines around his grey eyes. I'm better than okay. I'm free. Dante cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing along her cheekbones. I was terrified you wouldn't come back. I told you I would. I know, but fear isn't always rational. His voice was vulnerable in a way that made her chest ache. The thought of losing you before I even really had you. Isabella silenced him with a kiss. Soft at first, then deeper as months of suppressed longing finally found their expression. Dante responded immediately, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Isabella, Dante whispered against her lips, I love you. Not because it's convenient, not because you work for me, not because you're available. I love you because you challenge me to be better, because you make me laugh, because watching you solve problems is like watching art in motion. I love you too, she replied, the words feeling both enormous and perfectly natural. I love your quiet strength, the way you listen before you speak, how you make me feel like I can conquer the world and come home to peace all at the same time. Dante's smile was radiant. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her through the house, past the formal living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley, past the dining room, where they'd shared countless working lunches. Instead of heading toward his home office where she'd spent so many hours, he guided her to a part of the house she'd never seen, a cozy den with built-in bookshelves, a stone fireplace, and comfortable furniture that actually looked lived in. This is where I really live, Dante said, settling onto the leather couch and pulling her down beside him. Everything else is for show. This is where I come when I want to be myself instead of Dante Leclerc, CEO. Isabella curled against his side, marveling at how perfectly she fit there. It's beautiful, it feels like you. I've imagined you here so many times, he admitted. Reading in that chair by the window, stealing the remote during football games, falling asleep on this couch during movie marathons. The domesticity of the images made Isabella's heart flutter. That sounds perfect. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Isabella's head on Dante's shoulder, his fingers running through her hair. The stress of the gala, the confrontation with Vivian, the closure with Marcus, all of it felt like it belonged to a different lifetime. What happens now? Isabella asked eventually. With work, I mean, people are going to talk. Dante was quiet for a moment, his hand stilling in her hair. I've been thinking about that. I have a proposal. Isabella tensed slightly. Oh? Caldwell Industries has been trying to poach you for months. Their offer for a senior operations manager position is still on the table. Dante's voice was carefully neutral. It's a significant promotion, better pay, and it would eliminate any conflict of interest. Isabella sat up to look at him, surprised by the suggestion. You want me to leave Leclerc Vineyards? I want you to have choices. I want us to be together because we choose each other, not because our professional lives are tangled together. Dante's expression was earnest. If you took the Caldwell position, we'd be equals. No one could ever question whether our relationship was about power dynamics or career advancement. The thoughtfulness of the gesture took Isabella's breath away. Here was a man willing to lose his best assistant so that she could flourish in her own right. And if I don't want the Caldwell job, then we'll figure out how to navigate this together. But Isabella, I need you to know that whatever you choose, it has to be what's best for you. Not for us, not for me, for you. Isabella studied his face in the firelight, seeing nothing but genuine concern for her well-being. You really would let me go? I'd help you pack your office, Dante said with a sad smile, because loving someone means wanting them to soar, even if they have to leave you behind to do it. Isabella felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she had found someone who truly understood what love meant. I don't need to think about it, she said, surprising them both. Dante's face went carefully blank. You want the Caldwell job? No, Isabella said, laughing at his expression. I want to stay exactly where I am, with you, at the vineyard, building something together. But I want to do it as your partner, not your employee. My partner. In every sense of the word, Isabella shifted to face him fully. I want to invest in Leclerc Vineyards. I want to buy in as a minority stakeholder and work alongside you as an equal. I've been saving money for 2 years, and I know the business inside and out. I think we could build something incredible together. Dante stared at her for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed, a sound of pure joy that filled the entire room. Isabella Hart, he said, pulling her closer, you are absolutely extraordinary. Is that a yes? That's a let me call my lawyer first thing Monday morning and make this official, Dante replied, before capturing her lips in a kiss that tasted like promise and possibility. As they held each other in the firelight, Isabella felt something settle deep in her chest, a sense of rightness that she'd never experienced before. This was what it felt like to be truly seen, truly valued, truly loved. For the first time in her life, Isabella Hart was exactly where she belonged. The spring morning painted Sonoma Valley in shades of gold and green. Isabella stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office, her office, with her name on the door reading Isabella Hart, Partner Operations, watching the vineyard workers tend to the young grapevines. The space was smaller than Dante's executive suite, but perfectly hers, decorated with plants she'd chosen, books she'd collected, and a photo of her and Monique from last Christmas. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Ms. Hart, your 9 o'clock is here." Isabella turned to find James, her new assistant, hovering in the doorway with barely contained excitement. The 24-year-old recent business graduate reminded her of herself 2 years ago, eager, sharp, and slightly overwhelmed by the fast pace of wine industry operations. "Thank you, James. Send them in." The delegation from Westbrook Estates filed into her office, led by none other than Richard Westbrook himself. The older man who had questioned her presence at the gala now sat across from her desk, seeking partnership opportunities for the upcoming harvest season. "Miss Hart," Richard said, his tone notably more respectful than their last encounter. "Thank you for taking this meeting." "Of course, Mr. Westbrook, though I should mention that any final agreements will need Dante's approval as well. We make all major decisions together." It was true. Over the past 3 months, she and Dante had developed a partnership that was seamless both professionally and personally. They challenged each other, complemented each other's strengths, and had turned LeClaire Vineyards into the most talked-about operation in Sonoma County. "Actually," Richard said, glancing at his team, "we were hoping to discuss a rather significant proposition. We'd like to propose a merger, Westbrook LeClaire Vineyards. It would create the largest wine conglomerate on the West Coast." Isabella kept her expression neutral, while her mind raced through the implications. "That's certainly ambitious. What are the terms you're considering?" For the next hour, they discussed logistics, market shares, and operational structures. Isabella took careful notes, asked pointed questions, and watched Richard's respect for her grow with each exchange. When the meeting ended, she walked them to the elevator with promises to review their proposal thoroughly. "Miss Hart," Richard said, as the elevator doors opened, "I owe you an apology. When I first met you at the gala, I made assumptions. I was wrong." "Apology accepted, Mr. Westbrook, though I should point out that those assumptions say more about your limitations than mine." Richard's laugh was genuine. Dante chose well, in business and in life. After they left, Isabella made her way to Dante's office, finding him on a conference call with distributors in New York. He smiled when he saw her, gesturing for her to sit in the chair across from his desk while he finished the call. "Interesting morning?" Dante asked once he'd hung up. "Richard Westbrook wants to merge our companies." Dante's eyebrows rose. "Serious offer?" "Very serious. Potentially game-changing." Isabella settled into the chair, studying Dante's expression. "What do you think?" "I think," Dante said, coming around the desk to lean against it in front of her, "that 6 months ago, Richard wouldn't have brought that offer to me. He brought it to you because you've earned a reputation as the sharpest operations mind in the valley." Isabella felt a flush of pride. "We've both earned that reputation." "True, but today he came to your office first." Dante reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "How does it feel to be recognized as a force in your own right?" "Terrifying and exhilarating," Isabella admitted, "but mostly right." Dante's phone buzzed with a text, and he glanced at it with a smile that made Isabella curious. "What? Your sister? She's confirmed for dinner tomorrow night." Isabella blinked in surprise. "Monique? Here? How did you... When did you..." "I may have invited your entire family for the weekend," Dante said, looking slightly nervous. "I thought it was time I met them properly, as your partner, not just your boss." The gesture was so thoughtful, so perfectly considerate of what mattered to her, that Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. "Dante, too much? I know I should have asked first, but your mum mentioned on the phone that she'd been wanting to see the vineyard, and Monique said something about wanting to interrogate me properly." Isabella silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her love and gratitude into the contact. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "My mother is going to adore you," Isabella said against his lips, "and Monique is going to grill you mercilessly before deciding you're perfect for me." "I can handle Monique. It's your father I'm worried about." Isabella laughed. "Dad's easy, just ask him about his garden. He'll talk for hours about tomatoes and forget to intimidate you." Dante's relief was visible. "Good to know." They were interrupted by James appearing in the doorway, looking apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a reporter from Wine Spectator here. She says she has an appointment to interview you both about the partnership model." Isabella and Dante exchanged glances. The interview had been scheduled for weeks, a feature article about innovative partnership structures in family-owned wineries. "Send her to the conference room," Isabella said. "We'll be right there." As James disappeared, Dante caught Isabella's hand. "Ready to tell our story to the world?" Isabella smiled, thinking about how far they'd both come. 3 months ago, she'd been hiding in bathroom stalls, crying over her ex-boyfriend's Instagram posts. Now she was about to be featured in the most prestigious wine publication in the country, discussing the business she'd helped build with the man she loved. "I'm ready," she said, "though I think our story is just beginning." Dante squeezed her hand. "The best stories usually are." As they walked toward the conference room together, Isabella caught their reflection in the hallway's polished surfaces, two people who had found their perfect match not just in love, but in ambition, vision, and the courage to build something beautiful together. Her phone buzzed with a notification, and for a split second, old anxieties flickered. But when she glanced at the screen, it was just a calendar reminder about their dinner reservations that evening. Isabella smiled and slipped the phone back into her pocket without a second thought. Some notifications, she realized, were worth waiting for. 1 year later, Isabella stood in the same vineyard where everything had changed. The autumn sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, casting long shadows between the rows of grapevines heavy with fruit. Tomorrow would mark the anniversary of that first gala, that first dance, that first moment when she'd allowed herself to believe in love again. But tonight was about something else entirely. "You're nervous," Monique observed, adjusting Isabella's hair with sisterly precision. "I can always tell when you're nervous, because you get that little crease right here." She pressed her finger gently between Isabella's eyebrows. "I'm not nervous," Isabella lied, smoothing down her cream-colored dress. "I'm just processing the fact that Dante Leclerc is about to propose to you in front of 50 people?" Isabella's eyes widened. "How did you—" "I didn't tell you. Honey, the man asked Dad for permission 3 weeks ago, then called Mom to coordinate family travel schedules, then had me help him pick out the ring." Monique grinned. "You're the only one who doesn't officially know." Isabella felt her heart race. She'd suspected something was different about Dante lately, the way he'd been planning this anniversary celebration with unusual attention to detail, the mysterious phone calls, the barely contained excitement in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. "What did Dad say?" Isabella asked, suddenly feeling like she was 17 again. "He said Dante was the first man you'd brought home who looked at you like you hung the moon, instead of like you were a puzzle he was trying to solve." Monique's voice softened. "Dad likes him. We all do." Through the vineyard, Isabella could see guests gathering near the outdoor pavilion Dante had constructed for tonight's celebration. String lights twinkled overhead, and the scent of jasmine from the neighboring gardens mixed with the earthy smell of grapevines ready for harvest. "You ready for this?" Monique asked. Isabella took a deep breath, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she'd been crying in a bathroom stall over Marcus's Instagram posts. 6 months ago, she'd been terrified to trust her own judgment about love. 3 months ago, she'd been finding her footing as Dante's equal partner in business. Now, she was about to become his partner in everything. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it completely. They walked together toward the celebration, Isabella's heels clicking softly on the stone path. As they approached the pavilion, conversations quieted and heads turned. But unlike that night at the gala, the attention felt warm, welcoming. These weren't society strangers, judging her worthiness. These were friends, family, colleagues who had watched her and Dante build something beautiful together. Dante stood near the center of the gathering, devastatingly handsome in a navy suit that brought out his gray eyes. When he spotted her, his face lit up with such joy that Isabella felt her own smile answer automatically. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dante called out, his voice carrying easily across the space, "thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate something very special." Isabella found herself guided to the center of the circle, Dante's hand warm and steady in hers. She could see her parents beaming from the front row, James recording everything on his phone with tears in his eyes, even Richard Westbrook nodding approvingly from beside the bar. 1 year ago, Dante continued, his thumb tracing across Isabella's knuckles, I thought I understood what partnership meant. I thought it was about compatible goals, shared interests, mutual respect. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I was wrong, Dante said, his eyes never leaving Isabella's face. Real partnership isn't about finding someone who complements your strengths. It's about finding someone who challenges you to discover strengths you didn't know you had. Isabella felt tears prick her eyes as Dante dropped to one knee, producing a vintage ring box that looked suspiciously like it had belonged to his grandmother. Isabella Hart, Dante said, his voice steady despite the emotion written across his features. You didn't just become my business partner. You became my best friend, my greatest challenge, my safest harbor, and my wildest adventure all at once. The ring was perfect, a brilliant solitaire surrounded by smaller diamonds, elegant and timeless without being ostentatious. Exactly what she would have chosen if she dared to dream. You taught me that love isn't about finding someone to complete you, Dante continued. It's about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself, someone who sees your potential and dares you to reach for it. Isabella was crying now, not caring that 50 people were watching her mascara probably run. So I'm asking you, in front of everyone we love, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in all the ways that matter? Will you help me build a life as beautiful as what we've created together here? The word yes was barely a whisper, but it carried across the silent vineyard like a promise. Dante slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like wine and tears and forever. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, but Isabella barely heard them. All she could focus on was the man holding her, like she was something precious, something worth fighting for. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too, he replied. Always. As their friends and family surrounded them with congratulations and champagne, Isabella caught sight of her phone lighting up with notifications, well wishes from colleagues, heart emojis from college friends who'd seen Monique's live-streamed video, messages from people celebrating their happiness. But for once, the notifications didn't make her anxious. They didn't represent judgment or drama or unwanted complications from her past. They represented community, love, people who wanted to share in her joy. Isabella looked down at the ring sparkling on her finger, then up at Dante, who was accepting congratulations from her father with visible relief and gratitude. Hey, she called softly, catching his attention. Yeah? Check your phone. Dante looked confused but pulled out his phone. Isabella had sent him a message while he was talking to her dad. The text read simply, "This is the last notification I ever want to receive, except from you." Dante's laugh was pure joy as he pulled her back into his arms, spinning her around under the string lights, while their family and friends cheered around them. And as Isabella's feet touched the ground again, she realized that some endings were really just beginnings in disguise. The best kind of notifications, she thought, weren't about what was ending. They were about what was just starting to bloom. 5 years later, the notification chimed softly as Isabella nursed her morning coffee on the wraparound porch of their home. She glanced at her phone with the casual indifference of someone whose relationship with technology had fundamentally changed. The message was from James, now Director of Operations at Leclerc Hart Vineyards, letting her know that the morning harvest report was ready for her review. "Take your time," she texted back. "It's Saturday." Isabella smiled, remembering a time when Saturday mornings meant anxiously checking social media, comparing her life to carefully curated highlight reels, measuring her worth against strangers' vacation photos. Now Saturday mornings meant watching Dante chase their 3-year-old daughter Luna through the vineyard rows, while their 6-month-old son, Gabriel, napped peacefully in his carrier beside her chair. "Mama, look!" Luna's voice carried across the gardens as she ran toward the porch, her dark curls bouncing with each step. She clutched a handful of wildflowers that had probably been growing in someone's carefully maintained landscape design. "Daddy helped me pick these for you." Dante followed at a more leisurely pace, his hair now threaded with early silver at the temples, his once pristine work shirts permanently stained with grape juice and finger paint. He looked tired. They both did, between the demands of running their expanded business and chasing 2 small humans, but he also looked completely, utterly content. "Beautiful flowers for my beautiful wife," Dante said, dropping into the chair beside her and stealing a sip of her coffee. though I think Luna may have decimated the prize-winning rose garden. They'll grow back, Isabella laughed, accepting Luna's slightly wilted bouquet with the reverence reserved for priceless art. Thank you, sweetheart. They're perfect. Luna beamed and scrambled into Isabella's lap, careful not to jostle baby Gabriel. At 3, she already showed signs of inheriting both parents' stubborn independence and fierce intelligence. Last week, she'd reorganized the pantry by color while Isabella was on a conference call, declaring the previous system not pretty enough. "Mama, tell me the story," Luna demanded, settling into her favorite position curled against Isabella's chest. "Which story, baby?" "The one about Daddy asking you to marry him in the vineyard, with the lights and the crying and the pretty ring." Isabella caught Dante's eye over Luna's head, sharing one of those silent conversations that had become second nature over the years. They'd told Luna the story dozens of times, but it never got old. If anything, it felt more meaningful with each retelling. "Well," Isabella began, automatically adjusting her voice to the storytelling cadence Luna loved, "Daddy was very nervous because he wanted everything to be perfect." As she recounted the familiar tale, Isabella's mind wandered to all the chapters that had come after that perfect autumn evening, the wedding 6 months later, in this same vineyard, with Luna's namesake, the full moon, providing natural spotlighting for their vows, the expansion of their business into 3 states, the acquisition of Westbrook Estates when Richard retired and chose them as his successors, the 2 beautiful babies who had turned their orderly life into joyful chaos, the moments that never made it into fairy tales, midnight feedings and diaper blowouts, heated arguments about grape varietals and expansion timelines, nights when they were too exhausted to do anything but fall into bed holding hands, mornings when they woke up grateful for another day of building this life together. "And then what happened?" Luna prompted, even though she knew every word by heart. "And then Mama said yes, and they lived happily ever after," Isabella finished. "But not the end yet," Luna corrected solemnly, "because you're still living the story." The wisdom of 3-year-olds never ceased to amaze Isabella. "That's right, sweetheart. We're still living the story." Dante's hand found hers across the space between their chairs, his wedding ring warm against her palm. Gabriel stirred in his carrier, making the soft snuffling noises that meant he'd be awake and demanding breakfast soon. "I should probably go respond to James," Isabella said, though she made no move to get up. "In a minute," Dante replied, his thumb tracing across her knuckles in a gesture that hadn't changed in 5 years. "This is nice." It was nice. Better than nice. It was the kind of morning Isabella had stopped believing was possible during those dark months with Marcus, when happiness felt like something other people got to experience. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Monique, who was bringing her own family up for Sunday dinner tomorrow, then another from her mother, asking if she should bring extra dessert for the kids, then one from Lauren Bridges, now a close friend, sharing photos from her daughter's first ballet recital. Each notification brought a small smile to Isabella's face. Her phone no longer felt like a gateway to judgment and disappointment. Instead, it connected her to a network of people who loved her, supported her, celebrated her victories, and showed up during challenges. Luna had fallen asleep in her arms, one small hand still clutching the wildflowers. Gabriel was stirring more insistently now, his internal clock reminding him that breakfast was overdue. In the distance, the vineyard stretched out in neat rows, heavy with grapes that would become this year's harvest. Isabella looked at Dante, still holding her hand, and felt that familiar surge of gratitude that had become as natural as breathing. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly, not wanting to wake Luna. "Miss what?" "The simplicity, when it was just us, no kids, no complications, just work and wine and figuring out how to be together." Dante considered the question seriously, his grey eyes studying their sleeping daughter, their stirring son, the home they'd built together from dreams and determination. "I miss the 8 hours of sleep," he said finally, making Isabella laugh. "And I miss being able to have a conversation without someone needing a snack or a diaper change or mediation over toy ownership rights." Gabriel's fussing escalated to proper crying, and Isabella began the careful process of transferring Luna to Dante's lap without waking her. "But," Dante continued, accepting their daughter with practiced ease, "I wouldn't trade this chaos for anything. Even on the hardest days, when Luna's had 3 meltdowns and Gabriel's been cluster feeding and we're running on 2 hours of sleep, I look at what we've built, and I can't believe we get to live this life." Isabella lifted Gabriel from his carrier, immediately soothed by his familiar weight in her arms. He looked exactly like Dante, the same grey eyes, the same serious expression that would undoubtedly break hearts in 20 years. "I love you," she said, though the words felt insufficient for the depth of what she felt. "I love you too," Dante replied, "always." As Isabella settled Gabriel for his morning feeding, she caught sight of her reflection in the window. Tousled hair, no makeup, wearing one of Dante's old vineyard t-shirts over leggings that had seen better days. She looked nothing like the perfectly put-together woman who had cried over Marcus's Instagram posts 5 years ago. She looked real, lived in, happy. Her phone buzzed one more time, a calendar reminder that she and Dante had a date night planned for next weekend, their first in over a month. Monique had volunteered to babysit, claiming she needed practice before her own second baby arrived. Isabella smiled and silenced the notification, then turned off her phone entirely. Some moments were too perfect to interrupt. What do you think makes a relationship truly last? Have you ever found love when you least expected it? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.